ready to get him going. So Sean Norris is the Cultural Resource Program Manager for TRC Environmental Corporation's South Carolina office. He is a graduate of the University of South Carolina. He has over 20 years of experience as an archaeologist, and he has worked on projects all over the Southeast as well as Puerto Rico and Egypt. So, Sean, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks everybody for showing up and coming out to this. We'll try to get through this and make sure no one gets too hot or anything down here with all these people sitting around here. So like Andy said, my name's Sean Norris. I do want to thank a couple people that helped me on this project and for this presentation. Jim Legg, who works at the university at SCIA, South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology, and W.C. Smith, who actually worked on this site that we're going to talk about back in the 1980s. And, I've got some slides of some of what he'd done back there. It's pretty interesting out there. So, as some of you, you probably remember if you were driving over Gervais Street Bridge and around this time in 2023, you saw a big cofferdam out there and all the dewatered stuff, and heard on the news how Dominion was mitigating all this manufactured gas coal tar that was in the river out there. So this is where that site is. This is what we found as we were helping them with their project there. And it all starts back at the Civil War. And we'll get our AV club specialty guy there. And it all started with him. There he is, the devil Yankee himself, William T. Sherman. He came in, this site occurred because of the burning of Columbia. That's what it started with. And this was, Sherman had just come through his march to the sea. He's got all his hardcore soldiers that marched through Georgia. They burned Savannah, and then they burned Atlanta, and then they came and all camped out at Savannah around Christmas time in 1864. And then they were all down there. And then if you just kind of picture, here 2 miles from the site, 160 years ago, February comes around in 1865, and Sherman starts moving. And everybody in Columbia doesn't know what he's going to do. So he kind of did an interesting little maneuver there. He had all his folks set up in Savannah, sent the cavalry up the Georgia side of the Savannah River, sent another arm up to Charleston, and then another arm up to Columbia. And that kind of froze everybody in place. Nobody knew exactly where they were going to go. Sherman himself and all the troops, they were like, South Carolina, that's where the war started, and this is where we're going to end the war. And this is his great quote. They just want to wreak vengeance on South Carolina itself. And sure enough, they came in and did that. Let's go ahead and move it up. So everybody here probably knows the history of it and his scene, and this is kind of a slideshow I show different folks in and around. But there's photographs of just the destruction after the burning of Columbia itself. And you all know on the Capitol itself there are artifacts, relics of the bombardment from Sherman and his troops. They all set up here on the KC side, shooting cannons over the river into Columbia itself. And you can take folks, I always take it whenever like my family comes over or my in-laws or something. We go take a look at the Capitol and we all got to point out all the cool archaeology and history out there. Like that's where the cannonball is. That's where it is. You look at the Iron Stars, and then we'll move on to
Sean,
the next one. Yeah.
Excuse me, can you talk just a little louder? We got some people out
there.
We got
All right, I'll try. Okay. So this is the origins of the site itself. And when we were researching the site, it was really cool to see. So at South Carolina Department of Archives, in their reading room, they've got a diary from 17-year-old Emma LeCompte. So it's all like junior and high schools, TikTok, Facebook posts of what's going on during the Civil War. And then there on February 13th, 12th and 13th, they didn't know what was going on. They were hoping that the Union soldiers would pass by, and she's not sure. And then Valentine's Day, everybody's in a panic. And then by the 17th, they know Sherman is right outside the gates on the Congaree River and coming in. And then by Saturday afternoon on the 18th, Columbia is burning, and she just goes on about how much she hates the Yankees and how awful it was out there. And then as 18th and into the 19th on Sunday, she's got an entry in here that is, and I'll point it out a little bit in the next slide. So this is an entry. We stood by the front window of the house, and it was shaken by a terrible explosion. And Henry, someone, just family friend that they know, that came over to the house, she said that our men, the Confederates, had come in and they buried a number of booby trap shells down by the river. And as the Union soldiers were getting rid of all the ordnance that is back there, this booby trap went off, killing all of them. And how they rejoiced so much, so excited that they went out there. But on the flip side, we've also got, go ahead and switch it. We've got the official records of the Civil War that talk about the events leading up to the burning of Columbia and the days before it. And then in the official records, this is actually what happened. During the 19th, an explosion took place near the river where a detail of the 63rd Illinois Volunteers were unloading all the ammunition from the armories in and around Columbia. And reckless habits by the soldiers. So I'll have a slide of kind of what was in the inventories before, but they were throwing out the black powder and all the explosive charges that were kept in these ammo dumps and the armories and the powder magazines. We figure the black powder kind of got scattered all over the riverfront and the riverbank, and then a spark, metal hit metal or something hit a rock and a spark hit, and an explosion happened, and it ended up killing a number of people, including this Captain William M. Davis, who was blown into the river and kind of disappeared for a while. No one found his body was not recovered until a few days later, where story goes, washed down the Congaree River over on the Casey side. People saw him there because he was a Union soldier, left him there. They didn't want anything to do with him. But eventually, you can go ahead and switch that one. Eventually, someone did come and find him, and William M. Davis is actually buried in the Florence National Cemetery down in Florida. So he was recovered and eventually kind of put into a military burial out there. And kind of finding that little trail of what happened with that guy, where he's actually ended up here in South Carolina, was one cool little side story of this project. So back to the site's origin. So when Sherman came, Confederates were, all the Confederate soldiers, essentially they got out of Columbia. They knew Columbia was going to be taken, so they all kind of got out of there. All the people that were in the armories and where all the ammunition was being stored, they begged and begged for trains to come in and to get all this ordnance out of here before Union soldiers came in. Sherman and his troops, they spiked all the railroads around here. Any train that came in, they were just taking citizens out and not worrying about any of the ammunition or anything. And keep in mind, this is like the end of the war. So all of this ammunition is a little bit older and it's kind of unused. If it was really something significant, they would have gotten it out of there quickly and kind of sent it up to the front lines in North Carolina or somewhere out there where it could be used a little more effectively. But there's entries in the official records where the armorer is asking for trains because they knew Columbia was going to fall and they needed to get some stuff out there. But this gives you an idea of just how much was out there, right? 500 men, and they were up to 1,200 men, including Pioneer Corps, and 50 wagons. They worked 24/7, 2 days in a row, just running up and down Columbia, making a circle from armory to powder magazine to whatever, to the Congaree River, dumping ordnance in. And we'll show you a little bit of where it was. So you kind of picture where we are. Congaree River's on the left-hand side. That little circle is where this site is. And it's right below the Gervais Street Bridge. So first red dot nearest to the circle is about where the Children's Museum is at. That is where there was an arsenal or an armory. Every red dot or every red arrow in here is where ordnance was being held in the city of Columbia. And so that's where all the 12,000 troops were. They were gathering the ammunition, the mini balls, the musket balls, the ordnance, the shells from all these different little areas throughout downtown, and then bringing it down. They probably circled down Senate Street, and the Columbia Canal was still there. There was a little bridge that went over it. And then there was a little three-pronged road that led to 3 different areas kind of around that canal. And one of the prongs is right, essentially just downstream from the bridge. One of them's directly out from Senate Street. One of them's a little more downstream. And that's where they threw all these cannonballs. And they threw all these mini balls and all this ammunition into the river. Let's go to the next one. And this is what was in there. These are the inventory, the official inventory records, and that's Palmetto Armory out there, what remains of it after 1865, a little schematic of what it would have looked like before it was burned and bombed away. But when we first heard about this project, we found this inventory, and they were talking about 1 million ball cartridges, 1 million musket balls, those are the little balls back there, the little caps back there, percussion caps, 6-pound ammunition, fixed ammunition, thousands and thousands of items of ordnance out there, and potentially, you know, it was all in the river. Some of the stuff towards the bottom, you know, kind of the miscellaneous military gear, the forges, the anvils. The Union troops probably took those with them, you know, any kind of expedient type of thing that would have been useful to them. But all the ordnance and all the calibers from the Confederate would not really work in any of the Union weapons and cannons and guns. So they had no use for them. And what they didn't want to do, what they didn't want to happen, was the Confederate troops all come back to Columbia after they left. Because they were only here for a couple of days, and then they ran off real fast up to Fayetteville to kind of finish up the Fayetteville Armory real quick. They didn't want everybody to come back in, grab all that munitions, and then start carrying their flanks as they were going on and making it harder and harder. So they threw it all in the river. But when we, you know, 10, 15 years ago when we first started kind of working with Dominion on this project, it looked like it was going to be just some incredible stuff out there. Not as incredible as it was still pretty cool stuff, but we didn't get all the stuff that we thought potentially was going to be out there. So I'll take I'll kind of be a nerd a little bit and talk a little bit about the different types of sort of ordnance we found and what was out there. And you know, we'll go through a little bit of everything of what we found, what was potentially out there, and then, you know, if you haven't looked at them yet, you can kind of take a look at what some of these actually look like, you know, in person back there on that one. Let's go on to the next one real quick. So we've got ordnance after ordnance, you know, many different kinds of things, some case shot, some stuff with 12-pounder guns, some larger fixed shells, 8-inch shells, 6-inch shells. This is just sort of giving you a little bit more idea. These are the various sizes. They'll run through, you know, 12-pound, 6-pound, 3-pound. These smooth bore. These are the solid shot cannonballs, like the shot put size kind of things that are just solid lead, and they are, you know, more for destruction, you know, shooting at a building, or the kind you would think that's on a ship where it would be intentionally just trying to destroy something like that. So back there in the back, you know, the larger one and the medium-sized one, those are the real heavy lead balls out there. And so we got a few of those. And then this is what they would look like. So in the ordnance records, if you saw things that say fixed, this is what they mean by fixed. It would be the shell itself, the ball, and then a powder bag underneath it, and it would be all strapped in a sabot, and that's what it means by fixed. So it would be a kind of bag filled with the black powder that would explode and be the propulsive force behind that ball. Most of these, like I said, were just in the warehouses, just being stored, so they weren't fixed and they weren't necessarily dangerous. However, we all had to treat everything like it could be potentially live ordnance out there. And that's where it got a little bit tricky during the recovery, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But that's just kind of give you an idea. You know, everybody sees the cannonballs and, you know, think of like a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something. You just ram the cannonball in there and shoots it out. But there's other parts to it for the actual firing of these things out there. And this is like a little cross section of what it would look like. This is so there's the smooth bore stuff. This is kind of a canister shot or shell, a bursting shell is what it's called, and that's the hollow shells. There's a hole in the top, and you fill them with the little golf ball size, BB size, musket ball size shells, and those are the bursting charges, the anti-personnel charges. They will fire. They'll be set to explode at a certain. There's a little. So on this one, you can see there's a little fuse cap on there that has a charge in it, where it's a real thin iron shell, and it's set to burst over troops as they're marching out there. And then it's just like a shotgun shell. You know, all the little balls are flying out, start shooting at everybody and just causing havoc wherever they go. And we found a few of those in there in the recovery itself. And then what we found most of are these canister shots, and you'll see them back there. They're the ping pong ball, golf ball size canister shot in there. And what that looks like, it's like what it says, it's a can, it's like a big Folgers can. There's a plate on the bottom and a plate on the top, and it's kind of surrounded by a thin metal covering, and it's just packed with these larger shells, and that's another large anti-personnel type shell. And I mean, you pick one of those up and you can just imagine, they're, I'll get a little bit technical, but the firing speed of this black powder isn't super fast. You know, it's not like a modern bullet coming at you. It's pretty slow. So you can probably hear and see these shells kind of coming at you as you're marching in line across the battlefield, and all of a sudden, you know, big giant lead golf balls are flying at you all over the place. I mean, it's got to be something pretty just terrifying as you're out there looking at that. So if you notice in the back, there's a little category called I don't know, they're just ugly shells. They're the Confederate armories are just, what do they call it, Keith?
Poorly made?
Poorly made. But they've got like the spalls on them that aren't cut off. They're just throwing